Here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we do allow for questions following the service. Some sermons may generate more questions than others. This may be one of those. What we've had to say this morning is somewhat, shall we say, off the reservation. What can I say? I was just cruising along, preaching through 1 Corinthians, and I'd never seen this before. I tell you, when I was studying this weeks ago, that just jumped out. Therefore, submit yourselves to such. And I was like, whoa. With all the talk about submission in church, here is something really, really directly said. It's one of the benefits of being a pastor, quite frankly. It's a great benefit. You're forced to study things. It's a benefit. Yeah, it's a responsibility, but it's a definite benefit as well. Big benefit. Who has the first question? Oh, yeah, okay, come on. Yes. Go ahead, Conrad.
Can you talk about church membership and church covenants, or not having them, from the standpoint of leadership succession and accountability? How do both of those things work when you don't have a membership or a covenant?
Yeah, thank you, Conrad. And I think what you're talking about here is, when it's time to move on, how do you choose who's coming up next?
And what if somebody's not doing a good job? How do you hold them accountable?
Yeah, if they're not. Yeah, without the church membership and the official role of who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote, how do you do this? I want to answer the second, how do you hold the person accountable? I want to answer that question first. Then I'll hopefully remember your first question. You can remind me. How do you hold the pastor responsible, an elder responsible? How do you do this? The way we normally do it is we call a church-type meeting, right? And somebody takes roll and only the members can vote, right? I actually think it's a lot easier than that. I don't think you need a church meeting. Paul says that you're not supposed to receive an accusation against an elder. Right? Oh. Yeah. He says don't even receive an accusation against an elder without witnesses. Okay, the opposite of that means if you have witnesses, you better receive that accusation against that elder. And what does the Bible tell us about witnesses? You have 2 or 3. So we just took it from a church membership meeting to a small meeting with 2 or 3 witnesses. I actually think it's easier that way to hold the leadership accountable than it is with the, shall we say, with the bureaucratic morass, if you will, of the membership meeting, and we all get together and we talk about it, and we split the church before we even have a chance. Now, your first question, I'm sorry, I knew I'd forget. Succession. So yeah. I didn't talk about it much this morning, but I think Paul here is getting them ready for that. And he's trying to teach them, and we talk about secession. Normally, again, we do it bureaucratically, let's vote. But I'm going to tell you something here, my friends, this morning. If you want to respond to me on this, you certainly may. We have a little bit of time this morning. But I think most of the time church voting and church business meetings is frankly a joke. Can we talk? Honestly now. Let's talk about like secession for deacons and elders. How's it happen? Come on. We all know, right? We know how it happens. The nominating committee puts together a list of names. Now, come on. How do you get on the nominating committee? You're appointed, right? Now, do you think the nominating committee, having their positions beholden to the church leadership, is really going to nominate a whole lot of people that aren't already pre-approved by the church leadership? I mean, come on. Come on. We got to be honest here and talk about the way it really works most of the time, right? And so the church people all feel like they get to vote, right? But it's really kind of like an approval process, right? I think what Paul's doing here in 1 Corinthians is saying, listen, you're not going to have me. In fact, early in the chapter, you might recall, he wants to come visit them, wants to visit them for a while. I think what was going on there with Apollos was Apollos, I think, had a very difficult time with the Corinthians. And he just didn't want to go deal with them anymore. That's what I think was going on. And so Paul is basically saying, listen, here's how the secession things work. It works not only bureaucratically by electing and voting and so forth. It works by you people having the discernment to recognize who has the leadership capabilities among you already. Because I'm not going to be around here forever. I may never, ever come back to visit you guys again. Here's the thing about all that. I want to emphasize this a little bit. Have you ever seen a church that just constantly has bad leadership? Have you ever seen that? Somehow they have bad leadership, they get rid of the pastor, and they get another pastor, and somehow they do it again. Whose fault's that? Who do you hold responsible for that? You know, most of the time, the people in the church are not getting to know the household of the new leader at all. They don't even know him. They're trusting their own leadership. I think what Paul's saying here is this. The main defense you have against bad leadership is you yourself, the sheep, know what's going on. I would argue, Conrad, the way we do it now almost ensures bad leadership. This way. Let's say the pastor hasn't taught his... Let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about unity for a second. Jonathan and I had a conversation about this yesterday. Oftentimes we talk unity in the church, it's not a unity of knowing. It's a unity of ignorance. And you can do that as a pastor if you're a good CEO. You have everybody just come and listen to you because you're just such a great speaker, and they really don't know much of anything. They're not reading the Bible themselves. They just believe that since you know so much, you're the pastor, they're just going to believe whatever you believe. And they really don't know anything. You can have that type of unity, a unity of ignorance. If you have that unity of ignorance, then whoever you get is probably going to be a disaster unless they're just as good at keeping everybody ignorant. Paul's talking here about a unity of knowledge here. And if you have a unity of knowledge, the assembly themselves will be able to protect themselves against bad leadership going forward, I would argue here. A lot more could be said about that. We have some other questions, but if you want to follow up, I certainly do not want to cut this off this morning. John is wrapping up his class this morning, so we don't want to squeeze him too much either, but we don't want to cut back on this. Yes. Thank you for having the courage to walk up to the mic, by the way.
I just wanted to thank you for pointing out the cost to the shepherd. I know sometimes in my family, I'm always thinking about my sheep and what they need to do, but I don't necessarily consider the cost to me as the shepherd. So thanks for reminding us.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a if you get a chance to see that, if you Google Caucasian sheepdogs versus wolves, you'll get a chance to see what I'm talking about. And that is a great illustration of the dads. I mean, husbands love your wives like Christ loved the church, right? There were times when Christ didn't look too good. But he's protecting his church.
Two thoughts about size of household and size of church. I'll start with the church. So size of the church, if it is the responsibility of the sheep to know their shepherd.
This is already good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's pretty hard in a church of 5,000 for them to know the shepherd. That's side one. The other side is side of household. It appears, and I think Paul was single, I think.
All are indications.
It may be easier
Some people
to,
believe his wife left him when he became a believer, but
Okay.
certainly at this point,
yeah.
so.
Is it easier to, the less household you have, to be more qualified as an elder? So,
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. You know, I'll share this. When to get to that, there's a lot there that, boy, we sure could talk about. I'll just share this quick anecdote. When IRBC started here a few years ago, I went home and said to one of the kids, I said, well, you know, kids, your dear old dad can be a pastor now. Of course, we had already messed with that a little bit. I had told them that since I'm a pastor now, they had to call me Reverend Saint in the house. That's my name. You call me Reverend Saint. Wow. Yeah, who needs one of those cool Pope hats when you're a Reverend Saint, right? But I said to one of the kids, I said, all right, I said, your dear old dad can be a pastor now. He said, well, why? Was that you, Mary? I said that too, yeah. Mary says, well, why? I said, well, because you kids are too old to be brats. So now I can, you know, be a pastor without the bratty kids, right? You're older now. Too late for that. But to get to that question, it might be the opposite. I mean, I'm just thinking, Tim, about your question. I'm thinking that the ideal situation might be small churches, big families. What's our model today? Big church, small family, right? Now, I don't want to come down on all big churches. Seemed like I don't know how the church in Jerusalem actually worked. 3,000 souls in one day. I mean, there's going to be a lot going on there. I don't know what they did. They didn't have, it certainly looked like they must have split up. We'll see later on where Paul says the church that is in the house of Priscilla and Aquila, they wouldn't have had a large meeting place. It would have had to, it seemed to me, have split up into all kinds of different places to minister. I don't know. I think it might be opposite. It might be the more responsibility you have in your home, and you can take care of that responsibility, then the more qualified you actually are. All that to say, there's all kinds of issues with having children, of course. Some people can't have them. I'll just say this. I remember when it was 13, 14, 15 years in a row where our house just kind of smelled like a dirty diaper, even from the outside. Was it that bad, dear? Was it that bad? She's not saying.
She's not smiling.
That's right. It was, you know, it was tiring. You parents know this, right? You know, that little children, that blessed moment called a half-hour real nap when one of the kids is not tapping on the door. You know, says, we had a nap for half an hour. It's like the millennium came. But what really, I'm on a rabbit trail a little bit here, but I have to say this, because not everybody can have children. I have to say this. We would be tired. We'd be like, man, this is going to be like this way forever. We were just tired all the time. Then we would, how about it, sweets? We would meet up with someone who couldn't have children. And that would sober us up in a big hurry. Because these people had really, really deep pain that nothing could touch. We were tired. But they had real pain. So we don't want to say that if you don't have children, that you're somehow disqualified. Paul was qualified. We don't know that he had children. We know that he had a nephew from Acts. But the point is, you still know the person's personal affairs here. In this case, nothing tells you about your personal affairs, what you are, how effective you are at teaching, and how effective you are at believing and doing than your household. You can't beat a household. Bigger the better?
Just one other.
Yes.
So singleness too can be used in a good way. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm single, I have a disease. So I think when a person's single, they have a bigger opportunity, a better opportunity to serve.
There's no question about that. We've talked about that before. Let me just, the question was singleness. You know, according to what I said today, can a single person then serve? Interestingly enough, Paul's, clearly by this time was definitely single. And he talks early in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, as we talked about before, that he can do certain things that married people can't. Interestingly enough, the Roman Catholic Church started out that way. You know how the priests can't marry? Right? Well, it didn't really start out that way. Their ideas back then was that it's a difficult job, especially being a missionary. Probably gets yourself killed. And they'd rather have the people get killed that weren't married than the people that were. It ultimately came to, well, if you preach, you can't marry. And this is something that we've had even up until recent times, right? In order to be a Pony Express rider, for example, you had to be, obviously know how to ride a horse. You had to be, anybody know what the weight was? 115 pounds or less. And you know what they specifically appealed for? Orphans. People whose family would be devastated if they got killed because it was that dangerous. And that's where the whole idea of the single priest originally came from. Now it's grown into all kinds of other crazy stuff. So yeah, there's no question. I think Paul actually addresses that in 1 Corinthians 7. The ability of the single people to serve at least in a different way. More, shall we say, it appears as if the model is the single people are more on the frontier. It looks like the married people he's talking about here are more in the established churches, ministering to the saints. Appears that way. Good questions. Tough topic. Appreciate your attention this morning.